This is red flag number 27 in the Red Flags of a Narcissist series. Red flag number 27 is impulsive or reckless behavior. This is really common for narcissists, because again, they're driven by their whims, right? They're driven to feed their ego. And it's almost like their inner 3-year-old is steering the ship, right? So it's kind of, they want whatever they want whenever they want it. They don't think about consequences. They live very much in the moment. And this causes them to have, there's bankruptcy is not uncommon. A lot of credit card debt is not uncommon. Really bizarre, poor financial decisions. You might see, a narcissist who might take himself out for a steak dinner and then can't pay his phone bill, right? Or it's their choices for what they're spending their money on or their time or whatever just doesn't seem to really add up. STDs, multiple children, unprotected sex. I say multiple children by multiple partners due to unprotected sex with, one-night stands, that kind of stuff. Very common for narcissists. Again, it's kind of funny because it's like they don't ever think about consequences, and they're always kind of shocked when there are consequences, which is, again, it's just kind of funny. I guess it's that sense of entitlement if I should just be able to do whatever I want to do without any, ramifications, without laws and rules. They really feel like just really don't apply to them. Some example. Okay, so then here's some more. So taking unnecessary risks. A lot of them tend to drive fast or drive reckless, or just really not take other people into consideration. Oh gosh, with both Steve and Jack, I always drove. And at the time, they made me feel like I was this old granny driver. And I really don't think that I am. I just think that I'm, a cautious, normal driver. There's no need to go, 90 on a side street. I wasn't okay with that, right? Because you don't know. Especially for us, we lived up in the mountains. Like, there's tons of animals out there all the time. You never know when you're going to turn the corner and there's going to be like a deer or an elk or something. And you don't know. And I guess you just don't know if there's children or people around. Like, why? Like, why are you doing that? There's a reason there's speed limits posted. A lot of them are dirt roads. They could be washed out. Just crazy. There's a couple of things. I actually recorded this video earlier, and as I was uploading it, I had to laugh because I couldn't believe, I left out some of the most obvious examples of impulsive and reckless behavior. So at the time that I was dating Jack, I didn't really necessarily see a lot of the impulsive, reckless behavior, even though there were some things there. I guess at the time, I just chalked it up to, well, we all have a past. We all kind of, have poor judgment at one time or another. I mean, he, again, had bankruptcy. He had credit at the time. He had no credit card debt because he was cash only because it's a terrible credit score. And bounced checks right and left. There was no forward thinking. But a couple things that he would do. So we lived down this mountain road, right? And he had a big pickup truck, and he had two dogs, and the one dog he'd had before a month or so before I'd met him, he'd actually run over and killed his dog by accident on this road because it was a bumpy road and you can't see. There's a lot of blind spots when you're driving, especially when you go tearing down it, right? And so he didn't see his dog. He killed his dog. He was very upset about this, which I think any person would be, even though he was a narcissist, even though they experience emotions in weird ways. I do think that he did really love that dog. I think he did love his dogs. Maybe not. Who the hell knows? Who the hell knows, really? But with Walter, the other dog, he would do the exact same thing. And every day he'd get home from work, I would yell at him. And I kind of gave up after a while. I would just keep Walter inside because we let the dogs run loose. We had 20 acres. We were out in the middle of nowhere. And I would bring Walter inside while he came tearing down the mountain road because he loved Jack, and he would go running up to the pickup truck and he'd run alongside it, and he'd jump up, and but he's inches away from the tires, and so I knew the visibility that Jack had, and I knew that Jack just, again, there's no forward thinking there. So yeah, that was just unnecessarily risky. And then this other time, we had taken this workshop. This was kind of like the bigger red flag that stuck out to me, that I just thought, you're an idiot. Like, what are you doing? We had signed up for this straw bale building workshop where we were going to learn like these alternative building methods. And the guys were putting on the roof of this building, and there are these trusses, and there were these boards, like maybe 2x8 boards that spanned the different trusses. But all of the other construction guys had like harnesses on. They had safety precautions in place. They were using ladders. Jack was not. He not only was running, this is like a 2-story building, not only running around on the 2x8s, which some of the other guys were too, but he would run around on the trusses, which are more like, I would say probably at 2x4. I mean, 2x4, maybe 2x6. They were narrow, like a balance beam. And he's running around, just like a impulsive kid. And he didn't have health insurance. And I remember thinking, like, what are you gonna do if you fall? You're gonna fall 2 stories, you're probably gonna break something, and then what? But it's like he never thought about that, and I was this big wet blanket for thinking about stuff like that. It was really, really crazy. But probably the biggest red flag for Jack happened after I really found everything out. And so here he was, meeting up with all of these strangers on Craigslist, and all the time, dozens, if not hundreds of people. I had the misfortune of seeing video upon video upon video of himself having sex with these people, and noticing that he's having unprotected sex with total strangers that he's meeting on Craigslist. Men, women, couples, you name it. So he really didn't, obviously, like, that didn't bother him at all. I, of course, when I found that out, I was absolutely terrified and went to go get tested for everything, like I don't even know, like the next day almost. I mean, it was quick. It was terrifying. It was really terrifying, thinking this guy just he doesn't care. He had 2 children by 2 different women, neither one of which he had any contact with, which should have been a bigger red flag than it was at the time. I guess, his son, he'd gotten a girl pregnant in high school, and she had since remarried, and, well, he'd never married her, but she'd since married somebody else, and he'd adopted his son, and, he just didn't have any contact with him. And I think my problem is I make all these allowances for people's behavior because it's like we all have a past, and maybe that's appropriate between friends to be like, well, we have a past. But if you're dating somebody, maybe I personally need to have some like higher standards. I don't know. I don't know. But so, and then his daughter, who was like 4 years old at the time, I don't really quite know what I believe about that. I think he got that woman pregnant on purpose and trying to trap her, and then it backfired on him. But his mom would send him like pictures of her every now and again, and I remember thinking that he didn't like react how I would expect a person to react to that, and he just didn't seem to really care. It was sort of like, oh yeah, my mom sent me this picture of her. You could tell there was a lot more to the story there. It just was very, very odd. I'm not quite sure how to describe it. So that, common kind of reckless, impulsive behavior, probably, okay, here's a better example. And again, like, it's so crazy. I'm thinking about this and I'm thinking, like, how come I didn't think of this earlier? Steve, this is like such a perfect example. Okay, so when Steve and I got together, right, he had told me, him and his wife were having problems, and that they were headed towards divorce, but he was under the same roof because he kind of felt sorry for her. It was the whole victim hero speak, right? Well, I told him I'm not getting involved with a married man. He needs to move out. He needs to file papers. He did exactly that the next day. So talk about impulsive, right? He ups and leaves his wife, who did not see it coming. Turns out, no, they weren't in separate bedrooms, and they weren't unhappy. She had no idea. She was totally blindsided by it. He upped and left her. He upped and quit his job. I really don't even know why. Now, granted, we had an absolutely nutso director at that school who I would say is also a narcissist. She was crazy, but totally like delusional narcissist. and he really couldn't work for her. So I totally, like, I understand that. But it was just very, very strange because it was almost summertime. Like, there was no real reason for him to up and quit. But he upped and quit his job. He cashed out his retirement to give his, his soon-to-be ex-wife half. He ended up moving in with me. He sold, we had to kind of sell his car because we could only tow one car. But he ended up giving away his dog to make the move. He could not have set off like any more bombs in his life than he did, all within a span of like 30 days. He upped and moved to Michigan with me from New Mexico. It's a 26-hour drive. Very impulsive. Then when we were out here, we were going to buy a house together. We had a contract on a house. That it's like there was no forward thinking. So when he couldn't get a job out here, he couldn't get things lined up. We were fighting about his faith and how that was going to play out in our life. He ended up and leaving me, going back to his wife, and then it was just like a series of stuff that just was not thought through like at all. And he didn't. It just was bizarre. It was just really, really bizarre to see. And I just kept thinking, like, what is your plan? Like, what were you thinking? But I think with the whole us buying a house out here, it probably would have been a great way for him to have kept some sort of hook in my life, because then I would have had to have dealt with him to, refinance it or whatever. So impulsive, reckless behavior, it's not uncommon. It would probably be more common if they were totally responsible. But, like I said, they can present really well. They can present like they are responsible. They always have an excuse for everything. They're never at a loss for words. They can really talk around a lot of craziness in their life and just make it seem like, oh, well, this was in the past and this was just normal and this is what happened. And it's kind of after the fact that I think a lot of victims start seeing these red flags really for what they are. So, that's that. So red flag number 28 is up next, and that is craves power and control. So I will see you soon. Again, if there's any questions, comments, concerns, frustrations, ideas for videos, you want to share part of your story, you just want to say hi, let me know. My website's down below, narcissistsupport.com, or my Facebook group, which is also called Narcissist Support. My name is Dana, and I will see you soon.